We must find out why Black children are taking their lives at an alarming rate, and we must continue to come together and devise solutions that will put an end to it.
Good evening and welcome to Metro Focus. I'm Rafael P. Roman. The statistics are startling. A new study shows that suicide attempts among African American adolescents surged between 1991 and 2017. According to the data, Black teen suicide attempts rose by 73%, even as suicide attempts by white teenagers dropped 7.5%. So what's driving this troubling and heartbreaking reality? And what must be done to end it? Joining us now with answers is Dr. Michael A. Lindsay, the study's lead author and the executive director of the McSilver Institute for Poverty Policy and Research at New York University. Dr. Lindsay, thank you so much for joining us today.
Rafael, thank you for having me.
So, Doctor, you recently said that these kids are telling us something with these heartbreaking suicide attempts. Aside from them telling us that they're in deep emotional pain, what else are they telling us?
The first thing that I look at is a precursor issue like depression. And what I mean by that is kids who are attempting suicide may actually have untreated depression. And what we know is that for Black youth, for example, their depression symptoms are often expressed in different ways than we might not sort of be, wise about. And so, for example, they may complain of a stomach ache or a headache, or they may have interpersonal challenges in terms of relationship difficulty. And oftentimes we cast those situations aside. We don't consider them to be mental health issues symptomatic of, for example, depression. And so we might, in schools, suspend kids as opposed to treating those issues. And so I think the kids are telling us that they want to be heard around the things that matter to them the most.
So what did your research discover about what is causing this increase in depression among Black adolescents that in turn is leading to these suicide attempts?
Well, our study was not about looking at what caused these issues, but it was more so about looking at the trends of engagement in suicide behaviors over time. And so, again, as you started off with respect to the 73% rise in suicide attempts, essentially, we believe that, in part, it could be related to the fact that kids are, particularly Black kids, are engaging in more impulsive decision-making around suicide behavior. Because at the same time, Rafael, we saw that suicide ideation in terms of thinking about suicide and suicide plans were trending downward while suicide attempts were going up. Mm-hmm. What we've also seen, I'll just add one more thing here. What we've also seen is that Black kids tend not to be connected to treatment for depression. And so we have, in terms of my research, I've looked at a number of things over the years that may be related to untreated depression, including stigma related to mental health service use or fear of not being able to get along with the mental health provider, or that the provider won't understand their unique, circumstances.
And going back to what you said, these teens or these adolescents are thinking less about committing suicide and about how to go about it, but they're doing it more, which means that it's much more of an impulse thing, which makes it more tragic, right? Because if it's an impulse thing, it's something that if caught, you could do something about.
Yeah. Well, I want to be careful because it's my speculation and that of my fellow colleagues on the study that it could be related to impulsivity, but we need to do more research to document that, Rafael, because it's really sort of scary to me, right? That kids are actually, particularly Black kids, are going right to an attempt without planning or thinking about it. And so it really begs that we need more research to truly understand what's happening.
Now, the report also found that among African American adolescents, Black teen girls are attempting suicide at higher rates than black teen boys. Why?
Well, I can point to a number of things as potential reasons. One is we know that girls tend to use social media at higher levels and experience more interpersonal stress related to their social media use. It's been well documented that girls actually experience higher levels of depression. And so that might be a contributing factor. And then teen dating violence could be also a contributing factor because we know that girls tend to experience higher levels of teen dating violence. But I also think that when you talk about black girls, there could be a double jeopardy going on with respect to experiencing discrimination based on race and gender.
There was something else I found very interesting in your study. It's that even though black teen girls are making these attempts at higher numbers, when black teen boys attempted, they use more lethal methods. What are those methods that they use, and why do you think that is?
Well, it could be the case. What the finding actually suggested was that black boys are engaging in more or having more injury by attempt, which means that they could be engaging in potentially lethal means by which to attempt suicide. I think a number of things could be going on there. One is that we've seen actually higher rates of kids completing or attempting suicide by hanging or asphyxiation. And so I think we need to explore what's happening with that. We've actually seen some decreases with respect to weapons as like firearms as a method of suicide among black youth over the span of the last couple of decades. But I think more and more research needs to be undertaken to truly understand what's happening.
So one of your colleagues in this study, Dr. Sean Joe, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, said that the rise in suicides among black youth can most likely be attributed to a greater internalization of racial and structural issues, and I think that we can understand what that means, along with the decline in coping mechanisms. What are the coping mechanisms that they have, and why are they in decline?
Well, I think suicide attempts, or sort of thinking about suicide or planning suicide, are coping mechanisms that could be at play instead of or in lieu of not being connected to treatment. And so I think that understanding what factors are contributing to why kids are not connected to treatment, and one of the things I've been advocating for is, and my colleagues at McSilver, is that we need more mental health counselors in schools to give kids greater proximity to mental health treatment. Often, Raphael, what we find is that in poor communities, black and brown communities, kids are not able to access a mental health counselor. Or if they have a counselor, that counselor is there one day out of the week, let's say Tuesday. And so that makes no sense in terms of when problems are likely to manifest. We need mental health counselors in schools, proportion to the number of kids in schools. And so I think that's, a really, really important factor here.
What is the one thing that you think must be done that is not being done now?
I think that we're doing, and I applaud the work that's happening in New York City and around the country to recognize that we need mental health counselors in schools. I think that is the one thing that we can do, is get kids connected to mental health counselors available in schools, proportionate to the number of kids in that school. And I think that counselors have an opportunity to actually help teachers understand the subtleties and signs of kids who may be struggling. They can help principals and other administrators in the school understand. They can also work with families to help parents and caregivers understand those subtle signs and presentations that we should be paying greater attention to. And so I strongly advocate, and that of my colleagues at McSilver, we strongly advocate for the provision of school mental health services through the availability of counselors to kids who are in need of those services.
Well, Dr. Lindsay, thank you so much for joining us today to talk about this, and thank you so much for your work.
Raphael, I appreciate this time. Thank you.